So I don't remember a day in my life where I wouldn't have called myself a Christian. I grew up in a family where both my parents called themselves Christians. I even went to a Christian school for a couple years when I was in kindergarten and first grade. And so that's probably why, right? It's probably why I always associated myself with being a Christian, even if my life itself didn't model that of a person who is following Christ. For example, if you were to go back and look at my life during my high school years, back when I was your age, when I was your age, you'd see a kid who lived a pretty moral life, right? Like in the eyes of most people, I could say with confidence, like I was a good kid. And especially compared to the kind of parameters that I had defined what it meant to be a Christian by. I mean, not necessarily lining up with the scriptures, but I had made my own definition of what it meant to be a Christian. And in light of that, I was a Christian. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I got along with people pretty well. I knew I shouldn't cuss. And all my friends were doing that stuff, and I wasn't, right? And so I was better than them. And so clearly, at least at that point, right, I've got to be a Christian, right? I don't know. Here's the thing. Jesus didn't come just so we would live a moral life, right? He didn't come so we would be good people. He especially didn't come so that we could look at another group of people and then compare ourselves to them and then judge that since we're better than them in one way or another that now we're Christian. Definitely not that, right? But that wasn't it. There was other reasons too. Another reason why I was perfectly fine calling myself a Christian during those years is because, you know what? I felt like I had a pretty good grip on what the Bible had to say. Like I told you, I went to a Christian school for a couple years. I had parents that were Christian. I even found myself at church from time to time. And so, I didn't read the Bible. I didn't actually know what it said for myself, but I'd picked up things here and there from what other people had said. And, so I was probably a Christian because, I thought right thoughts about God in a lot of ways, right? I don't know. Again, Jesus didn't come just so we would think right thoughts about him, right? He didn't come so we'd be good at Bible trivia or pass a Bible class. That's not why Jesus came. But that wasn't it either. In fact, there was another reason. This was kind of the big one, at least in the minds of my friends, that distinguished me as a Christian. Because I had a lot of friends that were good people. I had a lot of friends that would even go to church from time to time and, would agree with the foundational things about what it means to be a Christian. But the thing that really solidified for us why I was a Christian is because I would pray. And I didn't pray often or anything like that. I definitely wasn't praying because I was trying to, maintain a relationship with God or anything related to that. But, if I had a quiz that I needed to pass, if I had an important game coming up, if I, needed to muster up the courage in order to ask a girl out, or, if a couple weeks went by and that girl broke up with me, guess what? You might find me praying. And yet again, that doesn't mean I was a Christian. Jesus didn't come just so he could be my little genie in a bottle, He didn't come to be my magic 8 ball so I could, pray or shake him or whatever and get the answers to my questions. That's not why Jesus came. And so if those 3 things aren't why Jesus came, then it kind of begs the question then, all right, cool, Mr. Wilson, then why did Jesus come? Well, glad you asked. When we get to Christmas time, we get these images of little 8-pound, 6-ounce newborn baby Jesus, laying in a manger, so cute, whatever, all that stuff. And that's not wrong. That's not bad necessarily. But the problem is that that's a lot of the times where our images or our thoughts about Jesus stop, especially during the Christmas season. You see, we fail to remember, we forget, or we make light of the reality that God, the most wise and powerful being to have ever existed, decided to humble himself and to be born in a dark, dingy, probably terribly smelling manger, right? That as a newborn, he was wrapped in just like a cloth, and then he was placed into a feeding trough, reserved for animals' food. And then as he grew up, time went on, and he eventually was forced to leave his home country, and he grew up in Egypt as a refugee. And Eventually he would return to Israel, but he'd be raised by parents who were far from royalty by any kind of earthly standard, and yet in the midst of all of that, he never for a moment ceased to be the king of the universe. Like when we picture the baby in the manger, that's fine, as long as that's where our images of Jesus start and not where they stop. You see, God is clearly intentional in what he does. And so if God in his wisdom and in his power decided that this is the means through which he was going to begin writing the greatest story to have ever been told, then it begs the question, especially for those of us who claim to follow Jesus, as to why. Why did Jesus come in the first place? Why didn't God write a note in the sky? Why didn't he, just send down a message apart from sending his son? Why did Jesus come? Because here's the thing, I'm convinced that Jesus didn't just come so that I could live the life that I had settled for the first 18 years of my existence. And in the same way, I'm convinced that God didn't send Jesus just so he could come so that many of you could settle for the life that you have settled for up until this point as well. Right? So many of you are good people by the world standards. You might have the greatest reputation out of anyone in this school. You might have straight A's across the board and an A+ in your Bible class. You might even pray from time to time. And yet all the same, you might be missing out. You might be completely missing out on the life that God has intended for you. But that doesn't have to be the case. Look, not only did Jesus come to earth 2,000 years ago, but throughout his ministry, he actually tells us in really clear language exactly why he came. And it wasn't so his followers could live these lives of mediocrity. And so I'm going to list off only 5, okay? There's dozens of them. You can go back and just do a simple Google search of it and find many more, but I'm going to just list off 5 of the reasons, 5 times that Jesus clearly states his purpose in coming to our world. And my hope is that you'll wrestle with these reasons, and that you'll come to see how not only do those matter, but how these truths should apply to our lives and shape the way we live our lives on a consistent basis. Okay, so if you're taking notes, you're going to want to write these down. All right, here they are. Number 1, John chapter 12. Jesus says, I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. In Luke 19, Jesus says, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. In Matthew 20, Jesus said, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. In John chapter 18, as Jesus is standing before Pilate, awaiting his crucifixion, he said, for this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I came into the world, to bear witness to the truth. And then finally, for our list here, is John chapter 10, where Jesus says, I have come that they, meaning those who follow him, I have come that they, that you, Christian, that I may have life and have it to the full.